Every woman makes the same fatal mistake. She miscalculates the man who refuses to beg, and when she realizes it, it's already too late. Tonight, you'll learn how that miscalculation becomes your greatest advantage. Because somewhere in your life, you've watched it happen quietly, slowly, almost predictably. You gave her warmth, consistency, presence, and she interpreted it not as strength, but as surrender. She assumed your interest meant dependence. Your loyalty meant lack of options. Your affection meant attachment. In her mind, she began writing a story where she was the prize, and you were the man who would always stay, no matter what she withdrew. That is the mistake every woman makes. Not because she is cruel, not because she is malicious, but because human nature deceives her. When a woman feels emotionally secure, she becomes psychologically blind. She stops evaluating. She stops observing. She stops fearing loss. And the absence of fear is the birthplace of miscalculation. She assumes you will remain exactly as you are giving, patient, available, because that is the pattern she has seen. But patterns can break, and when they do, the world tilts. Because there comes a moment in every man's life where he stops begging to be understood, a moment where he steps away from being predictable, a moment where he allows silence to speak for him, a moment where he withdraws not out of anger, but out of self-respect. This moment terrifies her. But before we go deeper, listen carefully. Subscribe if you're ready to see the part of yourself she never expected you to find. Good. Now let's continue. When you stop reacting, you force her to see the version of you she misread. When you stop explaining, she hears the weight of your absence. When you stop giving endlessly, she begins to feel the cost of her own complacency. Your withdrawal becomes the mirror she never wanted to face, and in that mirror, she confronts her mistake not with words, but with the rising, unfamiliar pressure of losing a man she thought she controlled. And this is where your advantage begins. Because once a woman realizes she miscalculated a man's value, her entire internal world rearranges. You become an unanswered question, a disruption in her certainty, a fracture in the story she built about you. And nothing destabilizes a woman more than a man she thought she fully understood, suddenly moving in silence. At first, she pretends nothing happened. She acts unbothered. She keeps her tone light. She behaves as if your absence is irrelevant. But internally, her mind is on fire. Women don't panic when you pull away. They panic when they don't know why. Because uncertainty is the emotion they try hardest to avoid. And your silence introduces uncertainty in its purest form. She replays the last conversations. She studies your tone in hindsight. She compares how you used to respond to how you respond now. Every small change feels like a clue. Every delayed message feels like a shift in power. Every quiet moment feels like a question she cannot answer. This is where her mistake becomes your leverage. You see, a woman's ego survives on one belief. I understand him. Take that belief away. And you take away her confidence. Your unpredictability disrupts her emotional map. The man she assumed was always available suddenly becomes a mystery. The man she misjudged as dependent becomes disciplined. The man she believed she could take for granted becomes the man she cannot read. And the moment she cannot read you, she can no longer control the frame. But here is the part men never fully grasp. Her miscalculation doesn't just change how she sees you, it changes how she sees herself. She starts questioning her judgment. She starts doubting her behavior. She starts wondering whether she pushed too far, misread your intentions, or underestimated your strength. This internal instability is not cruelty. It is the emotional correction she never expected. And now, whether she admits it or not, you've become the one thing she cannot ignore. The man who slipped out of her certainty and stepped into her subconscious. Because once you enter that space, she doesn't just think about you. She obsesses over the version of you she no longer understands. An obsession never begins with desire. It begins with confusion. Confusion is the spark. Uncertainty is the fuel. Silence is the oxygen. Women are not addicted to attention. They're addicted to the emotional tension created by a man whose motives, feelings, and intentions cannot be easily predicted. You've now become that man. And this is where the psychological reversal begins. She once believed she had all the time in the world. She believed your affection was infinite. She believed your consistency was permanent. She believed your warmth came without conditions. But when you withdraw, not loudly, but quietly, the ground beneath her ego cracks. She begins to feel something unfamiliar. Self-doubt. She wonders if another woman is occupying your attention. She imagines you moving on faster than she expected. She imagines you giving the same warmth to someone else, someone who sees what she missed. That thought alone hits her deeper than any confrontation ever could. Because rejection doesn't create regret. Fear of replacement does. And when a woman miscalculates a man who grows colder instead of weaker, she feels that fear rise inside her. Slowly, then sharply, then uncontrollably. But here's the part that gives you the real advantage. She doesn't blame you. She blames herself. She wonders if she pushed too hard, if she acted too distant, if she dismissed you too quickly, if she misread your intentions, if she misjudged your depth. Her mistake becomes a mirror, one she can't look away from. And in that mirror, she sees the version of you she never truly valued, standing taller, calmer, untouchable. This realization does not make her resent you. It makes her want you, not because you begged for her attention, but because you withdrew it. And in doing so, you became the one thing her ego cannot tolerate losing, the man she can no longer predict. And unpredictability, when it comes from a man who once cared openly, is not a trait. It's a shockwave, a psychological jolt that rattles her emotional calibration in ways she won't admit, not even to herself. Because now, every small detail becomes a signal. Your shorter replies, your calmer tone, your slower responses, your lack of urgency, your subtle indifference. These changes slice through her assumptions like a quiet blade. She begins to wonder if you've been thinking clearly this whole time, and if she was the one acting blind. Women don't fear losing men who chase. They fear losing men who evolve. And evolution is exactly what your silence represents. Not passive aggression, not manipulation, not emotional punishment, but transformation. You are no longer reacting from a place of longing. You are observing from a place of power. You are no longer trying to keep her interested. You are realizing you never needed to try. This is where her mistake deepens. She didn't just miscalculate your emotional strength. She miscalculated your identity. She thought you were a man who needed her validation, a man who depended on her approval, a man who would wait endlessly for her attention, a man who feared her disappointment. But when you step back, she sees the truth. You never needed her to choose you. You needed her to recognize you. And there is a difference. That difference begins to haunt her. It echoes in her mind during quiet moments. It lingers when she scrolls through your old messages. It stings when she imagines you smiling at someone else. What she once took lightly now feels heavy. What she once ignored now feels urgent. What she once controlled now feels out of reach. And the more distance you hold, the more her imagination fills the silence. Because imagination is the one force no woman can win against. It paints you in colors she didn't see before. It turns your absence into a presence. It turns your silence into a question. It turns her miscalculation into regret. And regret is the emotion that rewires desire at its core. Because regret is not sadness. Regret is self-inflicted fear. Fear that she pushed away a man who was far more valuable than she realized. Fear that she misread strength as softness. Fear that she confused loyalty with neediness. Fear that she mistook your heart for a weakness, when it was actually the key to a kingdom she never bothered to enter. This is where the internal shift becomes impossible for her to hide. She becomes quieter, more watchful, more deliberate with her words. She no longer texts to assert control. She texts to measure loss. She no longer delays replies to appear desirable. She delays them because she's afraid of saying the wrong thing. She no longer speaks with casual confidence. She speaks with subtle caution. Her ego is recalibrating. And recalibration is the most seductive form of psychological reversal. But here is the irony she will never admit. She doesn't miss the version of you she knew. She misses the version of herself she felt like when she thought she understood you. Your evolution forces her to evolve too. Your silence forces her to listen. Your distance forces her to reflect. Your strength forces her to question her own. And that questioning becomes the emotional trap she set for herself. If this realization is hitting deeper than you expected, like the video, because you're starting to see the power that was always yours. Now listen carefully. A woman's biggest mistake is not losing the right man. It's believing that man will stay the same after she loses him. Men don't transform out of spite. They transform out of revelation. And the revelation is this. She was never the source of your value. You simply made the mistake of offering it too freely. But once a man recognizes his worth, he never returns to the version of himself who allowed anyone, especially someone who miscalculated him, to determine his emotional weather. And this is the moment she feels the true consequence of her mistake. Not when you walked away, but when you stopped seeking the version of yourself who once needed her acknowledgement to feel complete. Because now, you move differently. Your silence is not emptiness. It is discipline. Your distance is not retaliation. It is recalibration. Your calm is not passivity. It is power. Women are deeply attuned to emotional energy and yours has shifted in a way she can sense, but cannot articulate. You aren't angry. You aren't resentful. You aren't bitter. You are simply done seeking validation. And that kind of man is the most dangerous man she will ever encounter. Not dangerous to her safety, dangerous to her ego, dangerous to the narrative she created, dangerous to the belief that she could always predict your next move. Because now she can't. Your silence is steady. Your presence is minimal. Your reactions are controlled. Your attention is selective. You no longer lean in. You no longer bend. You no longer soften yourself just to be understood. And this unspoken transformation forces her to confront a truth she never prepared for. She expected you to break. She expected you to chase. She expected you to crumble under the weight of losing her. But instead, you elevated. You rose into a version of yourself that no longer fits inside the frame she kept you in. And this is the true psychological twist. She didn't lose you when she pulled away. She lost you when you realized you didn't need what you were begging for. Now, the power has flipped, quietly, undeniably, irreversibly, and for the first time, she feels something she never associated with you before. Intimidated, not by aggression, not by dominance, not by anything external, but by the quiet, unshakable authority you now carry within yourself. Because when a man stops collapsing for love, he becomes someone a woman must rise toward instead of pull away from. Your transformation forces her into a position she never expected to be in, the position of emotional uncertainty. And uncertainty is the one emotion women spend their entire lives trying to avoid. But now it's here, living in her chest, breathing down her ribs, whispering questions she can't silence. Why is he so calm? Why is he unfazed? Why does he feel different? Why does his absence feel heavier than his presence ever did? Why can't I read him anymore? These questions are not casual curiosity. They are signs of ego fracture. They are psychological cracks forming in the story she once used to elevate herself above you. Because here's the truth. A woman never fears losing a man she believes she outranks. She fears losing the man she realizes she may have misjudged. And the moment she senses she misjudged you, her behavior begins to shift in ways she won't publicly admit. She becomes more careful, more observant, more emotionally cautious around you, not because she's playing a game, but because she finally understands she's no longer the one holding the emotional frame. And frame is everything. Frame is who leads the emotional dance. Frame is who sets the pace. Frame is who feels secure and who feels exposed. Frame is who stands still and who bends first. Right now, you hold the frame, not by force, not by manipulation, but because you stepped into your own center of gravity, you became a man who does not fall out of himself trying to hold on to someone else. And this version of you, steady, unreadable, self-contained, pulls her in more intensely than anything you ever said, did, or gave. Because women don't fall for effort, they fall for energy. And your energy is no longer reaching outward. It is drawing everything inward, including her. Because now she isn't responding to your words. She's responding to the shift within you. The shift she cannot name, cannot categorize, cannot fit into the frame she once used to define you. Your energy is no longer a request. It is a presence. A presence she feels, even in your silence. And that presence forces her to confront the very mistake she made, the one every woman makes. Believing a man's devotion means his permanence. She thought you would stay, because you cared. She thought you would wait, because you felt deeply. She thought you would break, because she pulled away. But instead, you became someone she now has to earn. This is where the psychological current flips beneath her feet. Her mind begins to roam into places she once avoided. Her imagination becomes her enemy. Her certainty collapses like thin ice, cracking beneath weight. Because now she wonders, did he ever really need me? Did I push too far? Did I underestimate him? Did I mistake his loyalty for weakness? Did I confuse his warmth with dependence? Did I misread the entire dynamic? These questions do not fade. They multiply. And in the quiet spaces of her day, driving, showering, lying awake at night, your image returns not as a memory, but as a possibility slipping away. That is the emotional leverage she created for you. The moment she miscalculated your value, but here is the twist she never expects. The more she reflects on losing you, the more she remembers every moment you tried to stay. Regret does not come from what she lost. Regret comes from realizing you were the one person she never should have gambled with. And now, she's unsure if she can get you back. She's unsure if she still matters. She's unsure if another woman sees the worth she overlooked. Her mistake is becoming her punishment, and your evolution is becoming her obsession. Because once a woman realizes she may have misjudged the wrong man, her mind doesn't just remember you, it reinterprets you. Every detail she once dismissed now carries weight. Your kindness becomes maturity, your patience becomes discipline, your affection becomes depth, your silence becomes strength. She starts comparing you not to who you were, but to every man she thought was better. And suddenly, those men fall short in ways she never noticed before. That's the thing about regret. It magnifies the value she once took lightly. But the real psychological twist is this. She isn't chasing you. She's chasing the feeling of knowing you again. Because nothing scares a woman more than losing emotional access to a man she once believed she fully understood. Your unpredictability becomes intoxicating. Your restraint becomes magnetic. Your absence becomes a presence she cannot escape. And the more she tries to regain her footing, the more she realizes something devastating. She can't. You've evolved beyond the version of yourself. She miscalculated. You're not ignoring her. You've simply stopped betraying yourself for the sake of being chosen. This kind of man, self-contained, centered, sovereign, is the rarest archetype she will ever encounter. And now, you stand at the intersection of her fear and her desire. Her fear that she pushed away the wrong man. Her desire to reclaim a connection she no longer controls. But here is the part no one prepares a woman for. Once a man rises out of the frame she put him in, he never fits back inside it. Your standards sharpen. Your tolerance shrinks. Your focus shifts inward. Your presence grows heavier. Your silence grows wiser. You're no longer the man trying to prove his worth. You are the man whose worth speaks for itself. And she knows it. So now, every move she makes is guided not by confidence, but by caution. Not by ego, but by fear. Not by leverage, but by loss. Loss she caused, and cannot undo. Because now she sees you with new eyes. Not the eyes of comfort, not the eyes of control, but the eyes of consequence. She realizes the truth too late. Men don't leave loudly. They leave quietly, internally, long before their footsteps ever touch the door. And when a man leaves quietly, he never comes back the same. That's the part that terrifies her the most. Not that you're gone, but that the version of you who once waited, once hoped, once reached, once tried, no longer exists. You've outgrown the pedestal she never put you on. You've evolved past the approval she once made you crave. You've surpassed the emotional ceiling she thought you'd never break. And now the frame is irreversible. You are not the man she miscalculated. You are the man her miscalculation created. A man who no longer needs external validation. A man who no longer depends on her responses. A man who no longer negotiates his worth. A man who sees clearly, not through the fog of desire, but through the clarity of self-respect. This is your ascension, not into arrogance, but into sovereignty. Not into coldness, but into clarity. Not into manipulation, but into mastery. If you feel that shift inside you, if you recognize the version of yourself you're becoming, then subscribe, comment, and share so other men can escape the mistakes they were never meant to repeat. Now breathe. Look at the man you are right now. Steady, silent, unshaken. A man whose worth does not tremble at anyone's absence. A man who understands that the greatest revenge is evolution. And before this journey ends, I leave you with one final Machiavellian riddle, the one that will echo in the quiet corners of your mind. If her mistake was miscalculating you, what will she do when you finally calculate yourself?